Hello and welcome back to our core Python programming course. Now, in the last few videos, we've covered some of the Python collections. We've covered string, we've covered list, and tuple, right? In this video, we're going to look at the Python dictionary data type. Now, what exactly is the Python dictionary? Now, we've included in the module on collection. It obviously has to be a collection, right? But in this particular collection, the sequence does not matter, right? You need to think of it as a set of key value pairs, right? What does key value pair mean? It means I have a set of keys which are like unique identifiers, right? And corresponding to that key, I have a value, right? And that value could be anything. It could be a string, it could be a list, it could be another dictionary, or anything that I put my mind to. So all I'm doing is I'm performing a kind of mapping, right? So when I search for a particular key, it gives me the corresponding value. So one thing you need to remember is the keys have to be unique. Okay, like if you think about back in your school days when the teacher used to call out attendance in class, it would be from a register, right? And there would be the uh, student ID, your roll number, and next to that there would be the student name, right? uh, the roll number would always be unique, but there are cases where two students could have the same name. So even if they have the same name, that is the value in the dictionary, that's fine. But the key, which is their roll number, has to be unique. Like you cannot have two students who are referred to by the same roll number. Exactly the same way, you cannot have two keys with the exact same key value in a Python dictionary. Okay. Now you've heard of JSON data probably. If you haven't, you will encounter it later on in either this course or in the next course. And that's basically used like it's a very portable data format, right? And typically the response from an API call is in JSON format. And JSON is exactly the same as a Python dictionary. Okay. You have keys and you have values, and the key maps to the value. Okay. So you can retrieve a particular value using a key. Now, in the case of lists, we saw that they use box brackets, right? In the case of a tuple, we saw that it uses round brackets. Now, dictionary uses curly brackets. So, and it's not just curly brackets, you have curly brackets where you have key value pairs. And how is a key value pair mentioned? You have the key here, which is typically only a string or an integer, right? Anything else, it's not a good practice to keep it as a key. So you have the key, then you have a colon, and then you have the value. Then you have a comma, which basically says we're moving to the next entry. So think of a dictionary entry, like you have the Oxford Dictionary, right? You have a list of entries. The entries happen to be sorted by in alphabetical order, but basically you have one entry for each word, and against that word you have all the possible meanings and synonyms and so on. So it's the exact same way here. Only thing is they're comma separated. So the first key is the number one, and the first value is the name Vikram. The second key is the number two, and the second value corresponding to that key is Vijit, right? So this is basically a dictionary. You have these curly brackets, and you have key value pairs where the key is separated from the value by a colon, and each entry is separated from each other entry by a comma. Okay, so in the first case, you saw how to initialize an empty dictionary with no items, right? In the second case, we saw how to initialize a dictionary with integer keys. The integer values are 1 and 2, and the keys corresponding to them are string values. The values corresponding to those keys are string values. So let's run these two things first, and I can show you how Python treats this dictionary. So I'll run the first I'll run this cell and only the first statements in this cell. Remember, to comment out a line or a block of code, you use control forward slash. To run the cell, you use control enter. Okay. So here you can see that I have successfully created a dictionary called d_1 and it contains no entries, right? So now let me create a dictionary with integer keys, d2, and I'll run that. You can see that d2 contains two entries, right? The first one has the key 1 and value Vikram. The second entry has key 2 and value Vijit. So we've successfully created a dictionary with no items and also with integer keys. Now I'll show you a dictionary with string keys. In this case, the first key is India and its corresponding value is 1.3 and the key is separated from the value by a colon, right? Now this is the first entry. Then we have a comma to indicate that we're moving on to the next entry. The second key is China and the second key's corresponding value is 1.7, which is the population, right? So let me just create and print this dictionary with string keys. So you can see in the second case, we had integer keys with string values. In the next case, we have string keys with float values. And the value could literally be anything. You could have list, you could have dictionary, you could have set, anything, tuple, whatever you want, right? So I hope you understand what the value of this dictionary is. It's a mapping, right? You're going to store a key, you're going to store its corresponding value, and you're going to retrieve that value using the key. Like for example, if I had a dictionary containing the scores of exam scores of all the students in the 2021, let's say, final exams. Pity the students because there are no final exams because of COVID. But let's say I had those scores, right? So if I wanted to find the scores for student with student ID or roll number 745, all I would do is dictionary of 745 and I would get the corresponding exam score for that, right? Okay, so moving on. Now you can have dictionaries with mixed keys also, mixed keys and mixed values, right? Like I've already told you the values could be anything. The keys could also be anything. Like some keys could be a string value, some keys could be an integer value. It does not matter. When you look up a value, there should be only one entry corresponding to that when you look up a particular key. Now, in this case, I have three strings, right? A, B, and C. And I have three integers, X, Y, and Z. I'm creating a dictionary where some of the keys are strings and some of the keys are integers. Let's just create this and show you how it plays out. So the dictionary is, the first entry is A is the key and B is the value. So X is the key and Y is the value. The string X and the string Y, I mean. Okay. In the second entry, the variable X is the key and the variable Y is the value. So 1 is the key and 2 is the value. And in the third entry, C is the key, that's the variable C, and the variable Z is the value. So the string value Z is the key over here, and the integer value 3 is the value over here. So let's print this out. And here we go. It's exactly as we predicted. So you have a dictionary here with mixed string and integer keys, right? And there's absolutely no problem in creating that. And there are also values of different data types, like some values are string, some values are integer. It doesn't matter as long as the keys are unique. Now, let me show you a dictionary with mixed values. In this case, you have exam score, right, which is the key, and it has a value of 99.5. You have country, and 99.5 is a float. You have country, which is a key, and you have India, which is the value, which is another string, right? You have ages, which is a key, and you have a list with values 50 and 60, right? As the value corresponding to the key ages. Then you have a key called dictio, and the value corresponding to that key is a dictionary with two entries. So in this case, we have a dictionary inside a dictionary. So let's run this code. And here you go. So we have all these different entries created exactly as we specified. So in this case, all our keys are strings and our values are of mixed heterogeneous data types: float, string, list, dictionary, and so on. And finally, just like I've shown you in the case of string with str, in the case of list with the list constructor, in the case of tuples with the tuple constructor function, in this case you have the dict constructor function, right? And what it does is it takes a list of tuples, right? Remember, list of tuples. And it's kind of like you remember the enumerate method, right? What not method, function. The enumerate function basically took and it took a collection and it expanded on that collection and gave us like key value pairs, right? It said at index 0 there is this value, at index 1 there is this value, and if we pass that to a list function, then you get a list of tuples, right? So passing that enumerate output to list gave us a list of tuples. And if you think about it, that's kind of exactly like how a dictionary also functions, right? Like you can represent a dictionary as a list of tuples, where each tuple is the key value pair, right? So the first value of the tuple is the key, and the second value of the tuple is the value. So if I were to think of this list of tuples, right? In this case, there are three tuples inside the list. Now, if I were to think of this as representing a dictionary, then naturally A would be the key, 1 would be the value, B would be another key, 2 would be the corresponding value, and C would be the third key, and 3 would be the value. So I can also construct a dictionary from a list of tuples using the dict constructor function. So let me copy and paste this. So ideally, it would be the same as me saying D6 equal to open and close curly braces. A has the value 1, B has the value 2, and C has the value 3. This would be equivalent to this uh, where I've used the dict function. Let me comment this and run it. And what you see here is exactly what we had written over here. A has the value 1, B has the value 2, C has the value 3. And we had represented this as a list of tuples, which then got passed to the dict constructor. Okay, so we've seen how to create an empty dictionary. We've seen a dictionary with integer keys. We've seen it with string keys. We've seen it with like creating it with mixed keys using variables. We've seen like multiple different data types being included in the dictionary, including another dictionary. And we've seen how to create a dictionary using the dict function and passing a list of tuples to it. So let's do the exercises now. Create and print an empty dictionary. So I'll say D equal to, open and close curly braces, print D. So this is an empty dictionary, right? You can see that value here. Now, create and print the following dictionary. The key A has the value 100. The key B has the value 200.5. So in the first case, it's an int. In the second case, it's a float. And key 3 has the value 1, 2, x, which is a list. So let's say I'm creating a dictionary called D, right? And the key A has the value 100. So this is the first entry, comma. The second entry, the key B has the value 200.5. So that's the second entry, comma. Moving on to the third entry, key is 3 and it has a value of 1, comma 2, comma the string X, which is a list, right? So there are three keys, which are A, B, and 3. And there are three values, which are 100, 200.5, and the list containing 1, 2, and X. So let me print this now. And here we go. So let's move on to the third exercise. There are two related lists with corresponding items India, China, USA, and 1.3, 1.7, and 0.35, which are obviously the populations of these countries. So let me say I'm creating a list, right? Countries first equals box brackets for a list India, China, USA. So there are three countries and population equals another list with three values 1.3, 1.7, and 0.35. Okay. Create a dictionary called countries where the keys are the indexes in the list and the values are the country names. So the keys are the indexes of these values and the values are the country names. So I'm kind of using only the countries list to generate a dictionary called list. So how would I do this key value, index value pair kind of thing, right? So I would obviously use the enumerate function, which we saw earlier. So if I were to say, uh, I'm going to create a list of tuples, right? And the list of tuples will be created using the enumerate function. So let's say list LOT, okay, list of tuples equals list of. We know that the enumerate function is like it returns an enumerate object, which is like an iterator to these tuples, right? So I then pass that to the list function so that I create a list of tuples. So enumerate of countries. So I have a list where we have uh, these countries and the index of those countries, right? Now let's so we have this list of tuples. Now what we want to do is we want to create a dictionary from the list of tuples. And I've told you that the dict constructor function takes the list of tuples as an input, right? So we can say that d equals dict of list of tuples, which is our variable, print d, right? And I can also say print, let me just print this list of tuples first. Here we go. So we created this list of tuples where we were saying we have these pairs, right? At index position 0, we have India. At index position 1, we have China. And at index position 2, we have USA. So that was our list of tuples. And we passed that to the dict function. And that gave us a dictionary where 0 is the key and uh, 0, 1, and 2 are the keys. And India, China, and USA are the values, which is exactly what we wanted here, right? Create a dictionary called countries where, I mean, that's not what we call the dictionary, but it's okay. Keys are the indexes, which is correct. And the values are the country names, which is exactly what we got. Now create a dictionary called country underscore pop, where the keys are the items from the first list, that is these. And the values are the items from the second list, that is the populations, right? So when you want to create index value pairs, you use enumerate. When you want to create corresponding kind of pairs from different lists, you use the zip function. So I'll say, and obviously zip returns a zip object, and that's an iterator, and you pass that to a list, right? So then you get a list of tuples, and that you pass to the dict constructor function. So let's say lot underscore 2, list of tuples underscore 2 equals, I'm going to create a list containing the zipped values of countries, comma, populations, right? So I'm creating a second list of tuples here, and let me print this out, right? Now I want to create a new dictionary which takes these values and converts them into keys, like takes the list of tuples and converts it into a dictionary. LOT underscore 2, print D2. And here we go. So in doing this operation, what we did is we zipped these two lists together, right? So India and 1.3 became one tuple, China and 1.7 became one tuple, USA and 0.35 became one tuple, right? So you had a list of three tuples, which is exactly what we got over here. Now, when we convert it to a dictionary, India becomes the key and 1.3 becomes the value, right? And so on. So we basically have key value pairs from uh, whatever we have in a list, like from the pairs, the first part becomes the key, the second part becomes the value. So we've successfully created dictionaries with all different kinds of keys and values. And now we will look at some dictionary operations, right? Now like in the case of the previous collections, like list and string and tuple, like I had created a separate section on indexing and slicing slash subsetting, which was basically the part on access, right? Like how do you access elements of that collection. Now in this case, I've not created a separate section on it, but I will cover it here before we get to the different functions, right? So if I were to say a dictionary has unique keys and the values corresponding to those keys, how would I look up a key? Like, how would I look up something in the dictionary? Obviously, I'll look it up using the unique key, right? And I'll retrieve the value corresponding to that unique key. So just like we have indexing in lists and tuples, where we say L of 0, L of 1, L of 3 to 5, and so on, whatever. Like we supply that information and that index in box brackets, right? In this case, the index is the key, right? So we're passing this key value within the box bracket. So if, for example, I create an empty dictionary here, right, called X. Now, the way I would insert a value into the dictionary is I would just say X of key 1 equals value 1. You remember this created a problem in lists, right? Where I specifically told you cannot insert values into a list using this method. But this is the exact method you use to insert keys and values into a dictionary. You say dictionary of key equal to value, right? Similarly, x of 1 equals value 2. So what I'm saying here is the key here is 1 and the value here is value 2. Similarly, x of key 3 equal to this list. And I told you a dictionary can have anything as like a key can have any value, any type, right? Including another dictionary or a list or any other collection. And then x of key 4 equals this dictionary with two entries, A 100 and B 200. So if you think about it, I have created four different keys here, right? The first key is called key 1 and it has a string value. The second key is just the integer 1 and it has a value of value 2. The third key is called key 3 and it has a value of a list. The fourth key is key 4 and it has a value of a dictionary. So let's create this and run it. So you can see that, right? Like this basically inserted a value. So you can think of it as an insert slash update, right? This statement for dictionaries is like an insert slash update. So if the key is found, then the value corresponding to that key gets updated, right? If the key is not found, then a new entry is inserted into the dictionary with this key and this value. Now, in our case, we had created an empty dictionary, right? So there were no keys and values present. So these statements were basically like insert statements, right? So for key 1, I have value 1 and so on. Now, if I wanted to edit that, right? I would just like run the exact same kind of statement again, right? So now let's say I want to change the the value corresponding to key 1 from value 1 to value 111. Okay, and then I'll print x again, and x being the dictionary. So here you go. So initially when we created it, key 1 had the value 1, and then I ran a similar statement where I said x of key 1, which is like this operation to access the value at key 1 in the dictionary. I changed that to value 111 instead of value 1. So you can think of the statement like an upsert, which is like an update plus insert, right? If it finds it, it updates the value. If it doesn't find it, it inserts the value. Cool. And that's exactly what we look at here. Like we've changed the value corresponding to key 1 to updated value 1. And here we change the value corresponding to key integer value 1 to 2, where it was value 2 before. So let me just change that here and I'll show you what I mean. So we had this initial creation statement, then we had these inserting of values into the dictionary, and now we're updating two of the values, right? So let me just show you the change here. So we created these four keys with these values, right? Which is what you see in line 1. Now, the value corresponding to key 1, I updated it here. And the value corresponding to this key, the integer 1, I updated it here. It was a string with value 2, and now it's an integer with just the number 2. So you've seen how to access uh, entries, or rather you've seen how to insert entries into a dictionary, and you've seen how to update those entries in the dictionary, right? So let's say I have a full dictionary with all these values that I need, but now I need a way to refer to these values, right? So we have to look at how to read values from the dictionary. So in this section, that's exactly what we're going to look at, right? I told you, like the way you would access dictionary entries is very similar to how you would access list entries. You would say dictionary name of key value. In this case, the key value is key 1, right? And we supply this argument in box brackets. So that's what indicates access. So if I print this, then what do I get? I get this value, right, which was the updated value 1. Let me just explain these to you while running them one by one. So just assume that this is the most updated version of the dictionary at this point, and now we're going to be accessing these values one by one, right? So what do I get if I say x of key 1? I should get updated value 1, correct? So let's run it and see. Exactly. So the value corresponding to key 1 is updated value 1, which is a string. And remember, x of key 1 in box brackets, square brackets. Now, how do I get the value corresponding to this integer key 1? I just say x of 1. Print x of 1 gives me the value corresponding to that key. The key in this case being the integer 1. If I run it, here we go. I get 2, which is exactly what I had updated that value to here. Okay, now we've seen how to access a normal element, right? Like in this case, in the first case, it was a string. In the second case, it was an integer. Now we have two elements where the value is a list and the other value is a dictionary. So how would we access that? So if I were to say, give me the first element in the list corresponding to key 3, then this is the statement I would write. I would say x of key 3, which basically gives me the list. And then I would index that with 0 to say, give me the first element of that list. So x of key 3 of 0. All of these in box brackets. Here we go. That's the value 1, right? Because 1 is the first element inside this list, which corresponds to key 3 in the dictionary. Similarly, uh, I've already shown you how to access a key, right? Like access a dictionary by its key. Now, inside here, we have a dictionary, right? And we have two keys in this dictionary, key A with the value 100 and key B with the value 200. So how would, let's say the name of the hypothetical name of this dictionary was M, okay? So how would I get the value corresponding to key A? I would say M of A, right? With A in the string A in box brackets. That's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to say if I want the value corresponding to key B inside this inner dictionary, then I will say get me X of key 4, which is this entire dictionary, and within that dictionary, give me the entry corresponding to key B, which is 200 here, right? So if I run this, I get 200. So it's like saying I'm going to access a value from the dictionary, and that value itself is a collection. So then I will use indexing to access further elements inside that collection. And how do, like, what happens if I try to access a key that is not present, right? Like in this case, I have keys 1, 2, 3, 4, or key 1, then the integer 1, and then key 3, and then key 4, right? So those are the values, or those are the keys that I have in the dictionary. So how do I get the value for key 5, which does not exist, right? Normally, like very commonsensically, Python throws an error saying it's not there. So if I run it, all the previous statements run as expected, but this last statement, key error, right? It throws a key error saying key 5, basically saying that key 5 does not exist in this dictionary. So that is a little problematic, right? Like at runtime in my program, I wouldn't know if there is some value present in the database or not. And but I would still need to like access values in a safe way. So that's where Python gives you the get function, right? For dictionaries. So it's like another way of accessing uh, values in a dictionary, but in a safe way, where if you're sure the value exists, then you can use this indexing kind of method where you say x of key 1 or x of key 3 or whatever. But if you're not sure if it exists, then use the get function, get method, right? So you're saying dictionary.get. And when I say dictionary.get, I mean the dictionary object, which in this case is x. We're saying x.get key 5, right? And if it's successful, it returns the value corresponding to this key. Okay. If it's not successful, you can specify a value to be returned. So basically, you're saying check if the value is present. If it's present, return the value. If it's not present, return this placeholder value, but don't throw an error. That's what you're telling Python with the get statement. So I say x.get key 5 and na, right? Similarly, I can say x.get key 3 and na. Now let's see how it behaves in these two different cases. Now in the first case, I'm going to comment out this old thing because that'll throw an error. Now in this case, I know that key 5 does not exist, right? I have key 1, I have 1, I have key 3, I have key 4, but I don't have key 5. So it it does not find the corresponding value to key 5. So it should send me NA, right? Because that's the value I've supplied over here. You can see that that's the string that gets returned. Or I could even say something like key 5 doesn't exist, right? And if I run this, I get the message key 5 doesn't exist. Now I'm looking for something where the key does exist in the dictionary, and hence the value corresponding to that key will be returned, and this placeholder value will not be used basically. So if I run this here, I actually get the value corresponding to key 3, which is this list, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I get over here. So that's when you use the get function to kind of retrieve a value from a dictionary in a safe way without throwing an error. Now, I've told you about the len function. Len is a built-in function, and hence you don't need to access it through the object. So it's not like dictionary.len. You're just going to say len of object. And in this case, object is a collection which is dictionary. A couple of other methods here. You have something called pop, right? Now, in the case of list, we saw that pop basically deletes the last element from the list and returns it simultaneously. Now, in the case of dictionary, we can't do anything like that because there is nothing called last element, right? Because order is not a thing. It's an unordered collection of key value pairs. So if I create a dictionary with specifying keys A and B, I should ideally be able to create a dictionary with specifying B and A, and they would be absolutely equivalent, right? So when I say pop, I need to specify the entry that I need to pop. And how do I specify which entry to pop? By specifying the key of that entry, right? So if I say pop of key 1, then the dictionary entry with key value of key 1 and the value corresponding to key 1, they're removed from the dictionary and returned at the same time. Okay, so I'll run these two and then we can just see how it works. So here we print the length of the dictionary, right, which is the number of entries. And remember, a key value pair constitutes one entry. So in this case, I have 4 entries because there are 4 keys and 4 values corresponding to it. And over here, if I pop key 1 and then print X after that, I should have only 3 entries remaining. Here we go. So if I print len of X, at this point, it gives me the length 4, right? Because there were 4 keys and 4 values corresponding to those keys. Now I have popped key 1. So I have just removed it from the dictionary. So now the dictionary has only 3 keys remaining, right? So if I say print len of X, then the len of X should now be 3, which is what we get over here. Let me just see what happens if I print out the popped value. So just like in the case of list, what happens is uh, x dot pop, right? It removes this entry and it returns it at the same time, right? So like I could store it in another variable or I could print it out or whatever. So this operation basically removes this key from and corresponding value from the dictionary. So I had printed out the length here, which was 4. Then I popped this and I printed it. So that made the length 3, right? And which is what I see over here. And the entry with key of key 1 is no longer present in this dictionary. So that is one way to remove and return an entry from a dictionary, right? Uh, there should be another way to do it, right? And that is using the del. We've seen the del function, which is a built-in function, even for lists. And in lists, del of x1 basically removes the list item at index position 1. But over here, del of x1 means I'm removing the dictionary entry with key 1. So at this point, you see that there are 3 dictionary entries, right? We already popped out one. Now, there is one dictionary entry with the integer value 1 as the key. That's the one we're going to remove using the del function. So I'm going to do del and then I'm going to print it, right? Remember in this previous case where I use pop, if this key is not present, then it throws an error. Okay, it's same thing with del. If this key 1 is not present, then it throws an error. But in this case, it is present, so it wouldn't throw an error. And it deletes it directly without returning anything. Here you can see now there are only two keys remaining in the dictionary, right? So when I popped key 1, one of the keys got removed. When I used del with the key value integer 1, that entry got deleted, and now there are only two keys remaining, that is key 3 and key 4 with their corresponding values. Now I'm going to show you how to just do a couple of additional really important things with dictionaries. Okay, so I've told you in a dictionary there are keys and there are values, right? So naturally, since Python is such an understandable language, how would I access only the keys of the dictionary? I would say x dot keys, right? How would I access the values? I would say x dot values. And how would I access these pairs, these tuples, a list of tuples of all the key value pairs in the dictionary? I would say x of items. So x of items is the key value pairs. X of values gives only the values. X of keys gives only the keys. I'll just comment out this thing for now. So let me just print these things and show it to you. So x of keys, right? You can see that here it returns an object of type dictionary keys. And there are only two keys in here, key 3 and key 4. Now, if I want to convert this to a list, and typically you would want to convert it to a list, right? So list of keys. So if I run it here, you can see that I have a list of keys and I can access it using usual key indexing methods. Similarly, I would say print list of x of values, right? Which is here. I have a list where the first item in the list is this list containing 1, 2, 3, 4. The second item in the list is this dictionary with 2 entries. And finally, I would also have a list of tuples using x.items, right? X.items gives the key value pairs, which is here. So key 3 and the value corresponding to it, key 4 and the value corresponding to it. So in the next module, we're going to be learning how to loop through objects, right? Like using for loops and while loops and so on. So how would you loop through a dictionary, right? You would want to loop through either all the items or all the keys. And that's when you would use this function mostly. And finally, I've shown you how to use the in keyword before. We can use the same keyword to check if a certain key is present in the dictionary keys or a certain value is present in the dictionary values. So if I say print key 3 in list of x dot keys, then you can see that key 3 is here, right? So it should say true. There we go. It returns the value true. So just to reiterate, we figure out how to create dictionaries, right? Using key value pairs of either string or integer type for the keys, and the values could be literally anything under the sun. We've also seen how to use the dict function and pass a list of tuples to it to create a dictionary. Now we saw how to also process and like access different dictionary entries. So one way is just using the simple indexing method like how we use for lists, and this works as an upsert kind of way. Okay, so upsert means if this key is present, update the value corresponding to it. If the key is not present, insert it, right? So I say x of key equals value. So this was how to insert it. Then we updated existing values, and then we figure out a way to access them using x of key 1 and so on. And if the value corresponding to that key is a collection, then you can further access the elements in that collection using box brackets. Then we saw that if the key does not, like in this usual indexing access way, if like for dictionary access, if the key does not exist, then Python throws an error. So we use the get function to specify a placeholder value if the value does not exist corresponding to this key. Then we saw how to use the len function to give us the number of entries in the list, and an entry is defined as a key value pair, right? We use the pop function to pop out an entry with a certain key value and return it to us. Basically, remove it from the dictionary and return it to us. We also deleted a dictionary entry using the del built-in function. Then we saw that there are three main sets of like things that are worth accessing in this dictionary. One is the keys, one is the values, and one is the items, right? And these are methods. So you say dictionary.keys, dictionary.values, and dictionary.items. And you'd have to pass them to a list function to actually convert them to a list. And finally, you can use the in keyword to check if something is present in the keys or something is present in the values. So let's do some exercises now to solidify our understanding of these concepts. Create a dictionary with one key, string, that has a corresponding value of this is a string. So I'll say d equal to, and I'm creating a dictionary. So the key is string and the value is this is a string, right? So I'm going to print this now. So we have one key called string and its corresponding value is this is a string. Now in this dictionary, insert an entry with key int and value 100. So it's a string key and an integer value. So it's the same dictionary that I'm dealing with. And I told you about this uh, dictionary method of like upserting into a dictionary, right? So d of int, which is the key value that I want to insert, equal to 100. Print d. Now it does not find, like this key value does not exist in the dictionary, so it gets inserted with this value. Here we go. So now we have the second entry successfully inserted. Insert an entry with key list and the values 100, 200, 300. So I'm going to say d of, in box brackets, list equal to this list over here, which I copied from this question. So now I'm increasing the number of entries to 3. And the third key is the string list. The value corresponding to that is a list with 3 items. And that's what you can see here. Now inserting an entry with key dict and value this dictionary. I'm just going to copy that and say d of dict equal to this dictionary, right? So d is a dictionary and in that I'm inserting a key value pair. The key is dict and the value is another dictionary. So it's like a nested dictionary. Here we go. This has been added to the dictionary, this key value pair. Now I want to print out the entry with the key list, right? And this is with and without get. So first I'll say print d of list. This is the usual way of accessing it. And I say enter and we get the value, right? Which is this list corresponding to this key. Now another way to get the same thing would be, because this is a safer way of getting it, d.get and list, which is the key we're looking up. And if it does not exist, say this key does not exist, okay? But it does exist, so I get the same value as above. Now print out the second entry in the list corresponding to the key list. So this is the list corresponding to that key, right? And I want the second entry, which is basically at index position 1. So I'll say print D of list, which is the dictionary entry corresponding to the key list, right? And now that that part returns a list, I want to access the second element within it. So I'll say of 1, which is index position 1, which is the second element. And that is 200, right? That's exactly what I want. That's what we get over here. Print out the first entry in the dictionary corresponding to the key dict. Now, I did tell you that like dictionaries are unordered, right? Like, so when I say first entry, I mean, this is technically incorrect. I should not be asking you for the first entry. So let's just say the entry corresponding to key A. So I'll say print D of dict, which gives us a dictionary. And I mean, I can say 0 here and it would give me the first entry, or actually it wouldn't. That's good, right? Because there's no key called 0. So I'm just going to say corresponding to A. That's 250. So you remember I had inserted this A 250 and B 500, this dictionary corresponding to the key dict over here. So the first entry in this dictionary has key A. So that's how I'm accessing it. You cannot access it using of 0 because Python looks for like 0 as the key. Okay. So I'm saying D of dict, which gives me a dictionary corresponding to this key. And in that dictionary, I want to get the value corresponding to key A, which is 250. Now change the second item in the list corresponding to the key list from 200 to 400. So you can see that when I did D of list, I got this thing with three values, right? This list contains three values, three elements, and the second element is 200. Now I want to change that to 400. So let's see how to do that. So D of list, right? This whole thing gives me a list of 1 because I want to change the second item equals 400 and hyphen used to be 200. Print D. So now if you see this list, the second value is changed from 200 to 400. So our operation was successful. Now change the value corresponding to key B from 500 to 600 in the dictionary corresponding to dict. So the key dict had this dictionary as the corresponding value, and this dictionary had a key called B, right, which had the value 500. I want to change that from 500 to 600. So I'll say D of dict, which is the dict value in the outer dictionary. And what it returns is this object here, right? This inner dictionary. And now in this inner dictionary, I want to access the entry with key B. And I want to change that from 500 to 600. Here you go. A was originally 250, that's untouched. B was 500 and now it's 600. You can see that it was 500 over here. So this is how like you can have any amount of nesting and all you need to do is keep putting box brackets to go further and further and further inside. Okay, now I want to print out a list of all the keys in the dictionary, right? So I told you about the keys method that gives you all the keys of the dictionary. So print list of d dot keys, and I'll say enter, control enter. So these are the keys, right? So I have four keys: string, int, list, and dict. That's what you have over here. Just the keys part of it. Now let's get all the values in the dictionary, right? So it's very similar. I'll say print list of d dot values. And here we go. Corresponding to these keys are these values in this dictionary. You have a string, you have an int, you have a list, and you have a dictionary. Now print out a list of all key value tuples in the dictionary. So what do I want? I want a list of tuples, right? And what method gives me that the tuples that I want? It's the dictionary.items method. We already seen keys and values. Now we want items. So we say print list of d.items, right? And this is exactly what we have. Key value pairs in the form of tuples. And that whole thing is contained in a list. So we have a list of tuples. Now I want to delete the entry with key int. And I want to print out the removed value at the same time. So if I wanted to just delete it, I would have used the del function. But if I want to delete it and return it and print it out at the same time, I use the pop method, right? So print d.pop, and I have to specify the key, which in this case is int. So it should print out the integer value, or rather just the value corresponding to the key int, right, which is here. And now if I print out the dictionary, wait, let me just, if basically I print out the dictionary, then this entry would be missing, right? So let me just comment this and I'll say print D. Here you go. Now you have only 3 entries here, and int is, the key value int is missing. Remove the entry with the key string. Now print out the entire dictionary object. So I'm going to say, in this case, I'm just deleting it and I'm not like returning the value, right? So I'm just going to say del d of string, right? So I'm deleting the entry in the dictionary corresponding to the key string. And I'm going to print out D. So now there are only 2 entries remaining. Check if the key dict exists in the dictionary, right? So I want to check if this value is in the dictionary keys, right? So I will use the in keyword. So print dict in list of d dot keys, right? Because list of d dot keys will give me all the keys in the dictionary in the form of a list, and dict in this list will tell me if it's present in that list of keys or not. So if I say control enter, it's true because there are only 2 entries remaining, but one of the entries has this key dict. So this returns true. And we need to know how many entries are remaining in the dictionary. So to know the number of entries in any collection, you use the len function, right? So print len of d, and this should give you the answer 2. There we go. It gives us the answer 2. So that brings us to the end of this section on dictionaries, right? So dictionary, just to summarize the whole thing, a dictionary is a Python collection containing unordered, so not a sequence, key value pairs. You can also call it a hash map, right? So key is mapped to a value. You can access it using dictionary name of the key, using box brackets. It's the same way you can insert values into a dictionary. It's the same way you can update values in a dictionary. We've also seen a whole bunch of methods like pop and del and get and items and values and keys and so on. So my suggestion is just run through these exercises once and it'll give you a much better conceptual understanding. Okay. Uh, we've seen keys with string uh, values, we've seen keys with integer values, and in the values part we've seen list, dictionary, and whatever else uh, you can set your mind to, right? So again, please do practice it once, and all our course material is available in our GitHub repository here, Vikramanak 85 Mission AI courses, and you can click on the course 1 core Python module 3. Okay, see you soon in the next video. We'll be covering sets, after which we wrap up module 3.